going to talk about the state of home-based workers in garment and footwear supply chains, engaging voices for meaningful change. And today we have an excellent lineup of speakers. I am Janvi Dave. I'm the coordinator for HomeNet International. HomeNet International is a global network of 71 home-based worker organizations from 30 countries around the world. Collectively, we represent over 1.3 million home-based workers. But before I start today's session, I would like to invite my colleague Laura Rivello, who's a communications and media manager, to provide us with some of the instructions for today's panel. So over to you, Laura. We'd be very happy to get instructions from you.
Thank you, Janvi. Hi, I'm Laura. As Janvi said, welcome everyone for joining. This side event is in a meeting format. I wanted just to let everyone know that. So please make sure to maintain your audio muted at all times unless there will be a question and answer session and your hand is raised and we give you the floor. Next slide, please, Sarbani. In this side session, we have 3 languages available for interpretation. We have Spanish, Hindi, and Russian. If you go to the bottom of your screen, if you're on your computer, you will find the small globe where it says interpretation. You just click on that, and then a drop-down menu will appear, and you can choose your language. The main language is English. And if you're on your phone, you go to the 3 dots at the bottom of the app and go to more. And again, a drop-down menu will appear and you can choose your language there. Throughout the side session, we will be sharing resources over the chat. So please make sure to pay attention to those. And also, if you have any questions or any issues with the interpretation, just make sure to write it in the chat. And I and the communications team from H&I will try to provide support. All right, so I'll pass it over to Janvi. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Laura. So do choose the language. That's the only way you'll be able to hear everyone. The way we structured today's session is we have 1.5 hours, and we are going to hear about the study from an excellent researcher, Shalini Kala. Then we have 5 home-based worker leaders from around the world who will be speaking about it because the studies were actually done by these organizations. And then we will have reflections from the law program director, Alison, who has also joined us from WeGo. So that's how we've structured today's session. So I think first and foremost, I'd like to invite Shalini Kala. She's a rural development specialist with a keen interest in rural enterprises for their role in empowering women. I'm just briefly providing her bio. She's an excellent researcher, and since the year 2017, she's been doing socioeconomic status of home-based workers in different geographies for HomeNet International and our sister organizations. We have this excellent study, which, Sarbani, if you could go to the next slide. I'm just giving a brief about the study. Shalini will definitely talk a lot more about the study. This is the study which we did on home-based workers in 12 locations across Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, and Latin America on the socioeconomic challenges they encounter in the garment and footwear supply chains. We have 724 respondents, of which predominantly most of them are women home-based workers. I'm not going to go into too many details because Shalini will talk about it. So let me invite Shalini. Shalini, I'm going to hand over to you to hear more about the study and the findings of the study.
Thank you, Janvi. Sarbani, can you please display my slides? So let me just say that as the slides come up, is that as Janvi mentioned, this is a study which was actually designed and done at the behest of home-based worker organizations that are affiliates of HNI, and it was done in participation with them. For this session today, the one question that I heard during the study was how many, and this was coming from many home-based worker leaders, who were asking how mandatory due diligence would help home-based workers in moving towards a stable work and earning situation, which is in line with living wages, non-exploitative work conditions, and access to social protection, something that they aspire for. Now, an additional question that one can think of, and this is for the work-generating brands, is how would this mandatory due diligence, help them improve production chains by making them more cost-effective, resilient, and sustainable? What I'm hoping is that once I present the findings to you, this will trigger a discussion, a conversation amongst all of us who are here, so that by the end of our session, once we also hear my other colleagues and home-based worker leaders, that we are closer to answering these questions by the end of it. One thing that I think a lot of home-based workers and this group, this audience, I'm sure, will agree with is that what home-based workers would benefit from and are looking for are suitable laws. There is definitely a need for better compliance of already existing labor laws. And definitely workers would also like to be more productive and more efficient, so that it takes them forward in terms of just what they can earn and expect from the work that they do for these production chains. So let's go to the next slide, Sarvani, please. One thing I don't have to emphasize to this group today is the magnitude and importance of informal workers, including home-based workers in the garment and footwear sector. This is like ubiquitous across the world. Informal workers are quite important. They bring in flexibility for companies to organize their production. And while there is progressively, estimates of how many home-based workers are there and what do they do, that is becoming better. We are not in a situation where we know with exactness and depth that is desirable how many home-based workers work in the garment and footwear sector, and what is their complete and comprehensive contribution. One of the key findings of this study was that the governments are unfamiliar in general about home-based contributions and economic potential. And I think this is connected with the last point that I made. The government statistics in most cases, in most locations that we studied, at best capture home-based workers in numbers and in their economic contributions only partially, and at times barely they capture them. So apart from one of these findings, the other 3 or 4 findings that I want to mention right in the beginning before I go into a little bit more detail is that home-based worker is convenient for workers, especially for women, because many of them are restricted to, due to their mobility is restricted due to household and care responsibilities, maternity, and many times social norms and other such reasons. So this is one way of them to take paid work. As I mentioned before, this is also a very flexible and cheap source of labor for work-generating brands. Then more often than not, the home-based workers are a marginalized group to start with, even before they enter the production chains, And this home-based work doesn't really reduce their vulnerability. In fact, due to low and precarious earnings, health risks that arise out of poor working condition, and no or negligible access to social security, the study finds their vulnerability is actually increasing. On a positive note, a move towards suitable laws and enforcement positively impacts the sector. This is what the study also finds out. And it finds this out through some examples. For instance, the collective bargaining process in Uruguay that is well established and regularly updates the minimum wages that are notified under the government's aegis, helps home-based workers and continues to make home-based workers top quality producers of whatever they do in the world. I should also mention here that only in Uruguay does the study find that workers who are sampled are managed to earn more than the minimum wage that has been notified. In every other location, they are not earning even minimum wages. And when I say minimum wages, I also mean, the per day or per month rate that has been mandated by the government. The second example here is that, as we learned in Bulgaria, is that redrafting or adjusting local laws to include home-based workers improved their access to markets. And then in locations where governments are more sympathetic and open to listening to home-based workers, for instance, there's a clear case here in Rwanda and in Indonesia. Home-based worker organizations are able to inform policy design, and it is hoped that the new policies or the change in policies will be more home-based worker friendly. Next slide, please, Sarbani. So let me go to the study now. I'm going to give you details, but only a few details, and Laura will be sharing some material in the chat if you want to look at some data, some details, graphs, and things like that. So the purpose of this study was to document the socioeconomic conditions of home workers. But we also looked at home-based workers. I'm not going to go into definitions, but home workers are more marginalized and are seen as having less independence than self-employed own account workers. And of course, the sector that we chose to locate the study in is garment, textiles, and footwear. The idea was to look at the role of home workers in 12 locations, which were chosen by the home-based worker organizations that are affiliates of HNI, and to understand the nature of their work, the kind of piece rates or wages they are paid, and their working conditions. And of course, this study is expected to help the home-based worker organizations that are participating and HNI itself to advocate for better conditions for home-based workers. Next, please. In the research locations, you will see there is a set of countries that has actually gone where actually garment and footwear sectors, and in general, formal sector has gone from being actually employment being very highly formalized to becoming to informalization increasing because of economic and political reasons, as in Bulgaria, Serbia, Argentina, Uruguay. And then there are other countries like in Asia where the move towards formalization of workers has been very slow, but still increasing. Yet in countries like India, 90% or over 90% of our employment is workers are informally employed, and which is both informal and informal sectors. In Uganda and Rwanda, if we look at them from the perspective of the sector, the garment and textiles and footwear sector, they are still much younger, and they are moving towards, in some ways, different ways, exploring how to join the modern global supply chains. Next, please. The data collection involved desk research, and we had a survey questionnaire for the home-based workers in each of the locations that were just mentioned. And there were some key informant interviews, both with home-based worker organization leaders and with some other worker organizations and NGOs that are working on or interested in home-based worker issues, and used both quantitative and qualitative data. Next, please. as I already mentioned, this is the kind of these are the kind of organizations that participated in the research. There are a total of 724 respondents, 93% of whom are women, which is actually reflective of the membership of the organizations and also reflective of the predominance of women, especially in the informal, who are informally employed in the garment, textile, and footwear sector. Next, please. The type of work that most of these respondents are doing are either tailoring and stitching or embroidery embellishment, both of clothes and of shoes, and then sticking soles to uppers of shoes, cutting cloth patterns, weaving, sorting, and packaging. That's a very general kind of set of activities. As far as employment status is concerned, 52% are purely home workers. If I put simply, home workers are workers who work on piece rate basis. And there are 40% who are purely self-employed, who are own account workers, who have a little bit more flexibility in choosing. But actually, in reality, on ground, if you look at it, that this is quite fluid, and people do move from workers do move from being home workers to purely self-employed workers, and some are actually pursuing both kind of work. So 8% identified as doing both kind of work. One thing also I want to mention here is that all the respondents in Rwanda and Vietnam are self-employed. The Vietnamese respondents who identify themselves as self-employed, if you go in a little bit more depth, it leaves you wondering whether they just have a little bit more flexibility than a purely engaged home worker. Then there are other locations where everyone is just home worker. They work on a piece rate basis. All of 91% said that they work from their homes or closer to some premises with other home-based peers. But there is a small percentage, 7%, who said that they do some work, additional factory work, where maybe the contractor or the factory owners provide workshop space. And then 2% said, but that is, of course, purely on informal basis. And 2% said they get partly some formal worker benefits. So that's a very small percentage. Next, please. Now, if we look at the working conditions, 30% respondents are migrants, 90% live with their families, 76% with children and elderly, which indicates the high level of household and care responsibilities for women. The women who participate are spending a lot of time at home on non-paid work. And for them, probably home working is the only feasible option for paid work. In terms of the home size, except for, say, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Uruguay, where the size is good, there are more rooms than adults in homes. In every other location, the home size themselves are small, and then the home structures, the quality of construction, the roof quality, they are all questionable. There are many things, when the report comes out, you can see in detail, the difficulties that home-based workers have working from home, just in terms of their surrounding, and the equipment they have and all that. Then 63% are homeowners, highest in Cambodia and 20% in Rwanda, which also tells you that 97% in Cambodia are actually working where they live. They haven't migrated, but in Rwanda, most people have migrated to production centers, employment centers. And 26% homes are without piped water. Next, please. In terms of work is irregular, it is uncertain, and in many cases, it is insufficient. So this is what leads us to a situation where earnings are also low and precarious. Here, I have mentioned some of the data, and one of the reasons for irregularity and uncertainty that was mentioned, which I want all of you to note, is limited orders. So limited markets, limited buyers, and if you remember during COVID times, it was also cancellation of orders, which make work extremely irregular. Care and household responsibility is understandable, but the other thing that is important in terms of reason is worker illness. And this illness, the various kinds of health issues are arising out of actually the work that they do. So there are many work challenges, and apart from these, low piece rates and delay in payments is something that respondents have mentioned. Next, please. Sarbani, next, please. So like I said, it's not difficult to then understand that earnings are low and precarious. And if we compare the earnings with living wages in all locations where such an estimate is available, in all locations, average earnings are lower than living wage. And like I mentioned before, apart from Uruguay, it is Tirupur in India, where the minimum wages, the earnings are higher than minimum wage, but they are lower than the living wage in this situation. Because of this, about 28% engaged in supplementary work, where activities like farming, street vending, other household trades, etc. But only 18% managed to earn from these earnings in March 2024, for which we collected data for earnings. And average, if we look at this in the perspective of family earnings, the average, on average, a large number of families of home-based workers are also engaged in informal work. They are also not doing formal work. So the situation is very Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so let me just.
I'm not sure if it's for everyone. Shalini, we aren't able to hear you. Yes, connection's poor. Can we just wait for 2 more minutes? I'm sure Shalini will be back. All right, till Shalini joins back, there was one question on the chat box which had come to me, was there's something which we take really for granted is the difference between the two categories of home-based workers. So home-based workers are workers who work from in and around their homes, producing goods or providing services. A lot of us already know home-based work because during COVID, most of us were home-based workers. There are two categories of home-based workers. Shalini did touch upon it. One is the self-employed home-based workers. Many also call them own-account home-based workers who have direct access to raw material as well as markets. While we also have a second category of home-based workers, which is what we call the home workers or the piece rate workers or the subcontracted home workers. The study was for them. Now, who are these workers? They are provided work through a series of subcontractors who could be individuals, or they could also be organizations. And they're provided clear instructions and are provided remuneration generally on the basis of piece rates. The primary employers in many of these garment and footwear supply chains are the brands, which could be global brands, but also domestic brands. So this was clarification on home-based workers. Just to provide you before Shalini joins back, Some statistics on home-based workers. The last global statistics that we have on home-based workers was provided by ILO in the year 2019. And the statistics says that there are 260 million home-based workers around the world, of which 57% are women. Now, it is very difficult to actually figure out the number of home-based workers in countries because the statistics just doesn't ask this question of where do you work, the place of work. As soon as you say home, it becomes home-based workers, but that is not generally asked. We have a very competent statistics team at WeGo who does this country briefs. Wherever they're able to find country statistics, they've done country briefs. And I would really encourage everybody to go through WeGo's website to find these statistical briefs of countries. Having said that, the statistics of home workers is very difficult to find. In fact, most countries don't have it, the subcontracted home workers. So just to provide that little detail about it, I'm just checking now, is Shalini back? Not yet?
Not yet, no.
All right. Okay, so we will come back to this last slide that Shalini has presented when she joins back. But meanwhile, I think let's go to some of these study locations. So if we can take the slide off, Laura. And one of the locations of the study was where we have ratification of ILO Convention 177, which is the Homework Convention, which is Argentina. So I'd actually like to ask Sister Jacqueline. Her name's Jacqueline Serrano, and she's a seamstress herself and is based out of Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's very early in the morning for Sister Jackie to join. She's the national representative of Sewing and Garment Workers Cooperative Federation of Argentina and the spokesperson of Carpincho, a collective clothing brand, and is also a member of HomeNet International's Gender Committee. Sister Jackie, I have a question for you, actually two of them. One is that what kind of policy risk are home-based workers in Argentina facing, especially those related to social protection under current government? A lot of the studies managed to capture some part of it, but it'd be great to hear from you. And the second part of the question is, are these related to poor policy implementation or withdrawal of worker-friendly policies or both? So I'm going to hand over to you, Sister Jackie, and we'd really like to hear from you, from your perspective.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. I don't know if you know about the situation that we are going through in Argentina with the current government. Home-based workers are struggling very hard here. And we do have a law regulating home-based work. However, the risk that we are encountering now is a hostile environment relating our work. And one of the main issues is what is happening with pensions. We used to have for home-based workers the possibility to retire and receive a pension fund, even though they didn't pay for taxes their entire lives. But now that right is being withdrawn from us. The thing is that when you're going to work in a registered employment, you need to go through a medical revision and the state checks whether you are healthy or not. And what has happened with us is that many of our brothers and sisters have health issues like sight problems or any sort of issue, or maybe we have sisters with other diseases like blood diseases. And for that reason, since they are not completely healthy, cannot work in a registered employment. This is why many of them end up working from home or being stay-at-home moms or being seamstress working from home. And this issue that I was explaining you about pension funds was a fee that you could pay at the end of your working career. And after paying that fee, you were able to receive this pension fund. However, with the current government, that is not happening. You can no longer pay that fee and be able to receive your pension at when you want to retire. And we are now, since we work from home, we decided that we needed to organize and do something together, because if we stay alone at home, we couldn't organize, we couldn't be so productive. So we tried and find a place of work for us to work together so that the state could give us more recognition. This was all collective work. All the things that we've done together were collective work that we wanted to do in order to give and gain visibility. We also were able to conquer what is called in Argentina monotributo social, which is a tax category that would give health insurance to our brothers and sisters, because we have sisters that have cancer, for example, like leukemia or other diseases that are very expensive. And thanks to our collective fights, we've been able to gain health insurance for them. However, all of this progress that we've made throughout the years is now being extremely affected by the new policies of the government. We were able to obtain our rights because we went out of our house, because alone from home, this would have been impossible. However, since we went out there and started working together, we were able to make some progress. So in general terms, what I can tell you is that now with this government, there is there's a clear issue in Argentina. We work from 5 a.m. to midnight. We work a lot, lots of hours. And the thing is that even though we are working very, very hard, uh, we are not making enough money. And we all live very far from the capital city. So this is why we had to go through an intermediary before. And by having an intermediary, we are having as intermediaries those people who do have access to factories who live closer to the capital city. And these intermediaries were bringing the items to our houses and they were paying very low prices. But after being organized and after creating our own organization, we were able to increase our rates very much. And this was very important to us because thanks to being organized and thanks to the fact that we were able to fight together, the situation really improved for us in the past. However, with this change of governments, all the rights conquered, like this tax category that I explained before, the monotributo social, are at risk. They are destroying this tax category for home-based workers in the new government, and we are really, really struggling. We are now seeing how the government is really affecting our situation. They, I would say, are destroying all the rights that we have conquered. So from our perspective, what we see is that this is not just one sector being affected. We see that there are many sectors which are affected by this government. And we know that the only way for us to do something is through collective organization, collective bargaining. We have strengthened our organization in order to be able to keep on fighting for our rights. And we are going to keep on going out to the streets. Even though there's repression from the government, we are still going to go out there to the streets in order to fight for the rights of our brothers and sisters. Right now, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. Our main issues right now with this government is that the government is not proposing any sort of dialogue or measurement to protect our work. Therefore, our priority is to not go back in our rights. However, our work is being under threats given the financial issues that Argentina is suffering. We are producing our products nationally. However, they are opening the doors for our country for cheap imports to come into the country. We are receiving now 15 or 20% of the work compared to what we used to receive before. And the cost of living is very high. And this is why we, as a federation, and as we experienced before in the pandemic, we created our own brand called Carpincho. It was very, very hard for us to create this brand because there is a lot of competition, as you probably know. But we created our brand, and you can find us on Instagram, carpinchoindumentaria.com. And this is a collective brand for the Textile Federation. And we have a little bit of everything. We have clothing, shoes, and all of these are made by brothers and sisters from the popular economy. We are more than 80 production units at the national level, and in the interior of the country, it is very hard to send work to our brothers and sisters. So through Carpincho, we were able to give these brothers and sisters from remote areas in the country to give them some work, because we know that many factories take benefit from these people and treat them as cheap labor. So our idea was to have a truly good national product. Now we are going through a crisis, and you know what? The situation is very much complicated here in Argentina. Many factories are closing down given the financial scenario. However, we are workers and we want to keep on working. We want to do something, and we know that we need to keep on fighting together, because behind this brand, we have brothers and sisters who have been fighting for a long time. We do not want to be exploited. We, in our brand, work with quality. We do everything the way it is supposed to be done. And the most important thing for us is that we do not exploit workers. We are paying decent salaries, and that is a very important thing for us.
Thanks a lot, Jackie, for coming and sharing your experience. You guys are facing a lot in your country. Due to the economic policies, the sort of setback that your organization and especially home workers are facing is immense. We are very thankful that you've come here early in the morning to share your experience with all the participants here. Thank you for also talking about the role of organizing and collective bargaining, and the impact of all these macroeconomic policies that have on home workers working in the last mile in the supply chains. So thanks a lot, Jackie. The study can't do justice to some of the experiences that you face. So thank you for coming and talking to all of us. Shalini is back, and Shalini, your last slide had some very important issues, and we don't want to miss that out. I'm really sorry you got dropped off the call. We'd like to invite you back to provide that last slide before we go to the next speaker.
Okay, sorry about this. So let's go to the last slide, Sarvani. Yeah, so one before that. So apart from the issue of one before that, one before this one, yeah. Next. So apart from all other issues, work-related problems, earnings-related problems, the safety net actually can come from institutional support. Next slide, please. So, but we find that actually in the study locations, there are several study locations where people are actually struggling for essentials. So 7 locations reported child hunger and six reported adult hunger. And like I mentioned before, health risks which are coming from the work that home-based workers are doing in the conditions they are doing are also high. So you will see here back pain, eyesight problems, allergy and respiratory issues, and work equipment risks and injuries are all related directly. And the indirect impact of climate change is also something that many sampled home-based workers are already recognizing. In terms of the institutional support that they get as just as citizens, this is uneven. It is not customized for home-based workers and for their particular needs, and it is also insufficient. So when we ask them about the specialized home-based support that they receive from any institution, 68% said they don't receive from anybody. 20% mentioned their home-based worker organizations, and 12% mentioned government, and 2% mentioned contractors and companies for in whose supply chains they are part of, but they also mentioned that this is not a very reliable source of any support for them. There is also very low or inexistent support for social security, which is essentially due to ineligibility in many countries. Being an informal worker makes you ineligible for pension benefits, health insurance, widow pension, things like that. And sometimes only very limited social security cover is available. In many cases, the design of the social security product is unsuitable, where it has simply been taken from what is being offered to formal workers, where a periodic premium is needed, or a very high level of premium is needed. But home-based workers have different kind of pattern in terms of what they earn also is low, but how they earn and in over what period they earn is also very different from formal workers. So that also basically it becomes unavailable for them. Those products become unavailable because they're just simply unsuitable. Now, to cope with this situation where their earnings are low, precarious, they have health issues, and they are not able to access institutional support, I mentioned before, 28% engage in supplementary activities, and many use other kind of coping measures like reducing consumption, delaying medical treatment, selling their assets, and about 64% across the study borrow. Borrowing is very high, and it actually, in many cases, there is also high indebtedness, which is in itself an issue. I also want to share with you this one quote from a worker in Vietnam, where actually situation is a little bit better than many other countries in terms of what they make and the sufficiency of the work. There is sufficient work for them, though they do work long hours. So working informally is convenient, but salary and welfare is low. I want regular work, high salary, and someone to support caring for my child. This actually sums in just this one sentence what many home-based workers are looking for. Next slide, please. So I'm going back to some of the key findings that I highlighted in the beginning of this presentation. I think it's very important that governments invest in statistics, in collecting data about home-based workers, understand their contribution to the economy, and also understand the potential. In many countries, like in India, not many women participate in the labor force. So government unfamiliarity is a big challenge in terms of how things can be improved for home-based workers, and how things can be from that angle be improved for the garment and garment, textile, and footwear sector. There is weak labor regulation and enforcement. As I have mentioned before, there are only 2 countries among our study locations, Bulgaria and Argentina, that have ratified the ILO Convention on Homework C1177. And you later hear our sister from Bulgaria telling you how even though it is ratified, it is still wanting in terms of just implementation and also formulating suitable rules and regulations so that home-based workers can benefit. In El Salvador, we found that contractors are routinely evading labor department inspections. And of course, for that, even the labor department itself is slightly responsible. The production chains are actually very non-transparent. We are talking about global supply chains here, but the respondents, none of the respondents, and even the home-based worker organization leaders were able to map the chain from home-based workers to the intermediating layers of contractors and subcontractors and factories to the final brand uh, in any kind of manner. The most that they could do was to just tell us about the closest link, the intermediate or the subcontractor person who gets work to them. Beyond that, and after COVID, it has also been a tendency of brands to not, or local factories, I wouldn't say brands because we don't know, but local factories and local work providers to not give any information which could come from clothing tags and things like that. So that also has become less and less transparent. In this group of respondents, there is a large, it's a varied, but it's still in many locations, there's a large percentage of home-based workers that are aware of their worker rights. And this is because, of course, of the organization and mobilization that has happened. About minimum wages, there are certain locations where the concept of minimum wages is not yet implemented, but in most it is. And the understanding of minimum wages and what applies to them is actually more limited than the understanding of worker rights. One thing is very clear, and as you may have also understood from Jackie's Jackie's experiences, is that the organization of home-based workers are very important to collectivize their voice. And they are the best place organizations, as we find out in this study, to advocate for their rights, because they are the ones who collectively present their voice and have in-depth knowledge of issues they face. I will end my presentation here. Thank you, and sorry for the disruption.
No problem at all. Shalini, we do understand some of these technical issues. Before we leave you, there are 2 questions that we have for you, and it'd be great if you could answer at this point of time before we go to other speakers. One is, how do the challenges faced by home-based workers differ across, say, different regions? And are there any contextual factors contributing to these variations? That's the first question. And sorry, I just read out the second question. Is from Aura from Philippines. She's asking, I'd like to clarify the findings on ineligibility to Social Security. Is it because of the category of workers as self-employed or home workers? And are we also pertaining to contributory social insurance, or does this include social assistance such as cash assistance? It's in the chat box also. Aura's question is there. So Shalini, both the questions are for you.
Yeah. So let me take the second question first. The ineligibility in some cases, and I will share the names of countries with you, is simply because they are informal workers. The contribution, where you talk about the contribution, is the unsuitability. That also exists, where there are social insurance or health insurance programs that are available to everyone. But because the design is unsuitable, for instance, it requires a minimum premium payment every month. is unsuitable for home-based workers because they cannot, it is not a regular income that they earn every month. That monthly period doesn't really apply to them. And they also cannot say whether they will earn the same thing or around the same thing every month. That is also not set, So that is unsuitability. But there are 4 countries, and there is if you would have looked at the other slides that Laura has shared as resources, there is a whole slide on social security across all the locations where 4 countries actually informal workers are just ineligible. They cannot participate in social security products like pension or health insurance. There are different products, but that is what it is. So that is, I hope that answers your question. In terms of the challenges faced by home-based workers in different locations, I think the work-related challenges, there is some similarity there. The difference occurs because of what is economically, politically, socially the situation in that country. So if I take the example of Argentina that Jackie just mentioned, Argentina is a country that has been facing persistent inflation for a long period. Here, if international producers or international brands would not even like to enter the country, because how would you formulate your contracts? You do not know. The exchange rate is changing almost on a daily basis. So it becomes very difficult. Work will not move there. But Argentina is a very special case where all this is happening. Politically, again, whenever there are political changes, again, Argentina is one country, but there are other countries too, which can make a difference in how home-based workers manage work aside. Even if the earnings are low and precarious, if there is good health service, if there is good education, free education, subsidized education available for their children, if they have the security of a pension, if there is widow pension, if there is maternity benefit, life becomes a little easier. So, but work-related challenges remain the same. Irregularity in work, uncertainty in work. At times, not at times, mostly work is insufficient. Only in case of Vietnam, they manage to get enough work, but they're working long hours, and the piece rates or the wages they are getting are not in line with even the minimum wages. Forget the living wages. I'll stop there.
All right, thanks a lot, Shalini. That was very useful information. And because we're going to run out of time and we have a lot of speakers, I'll go straight to Bulgaria, because we do have one of our participants from Bulgaria and she found the information very interesting. So I'm going to invite Sister Violeta Zlateva, who is the regional coordinator of Homenet Eastern Europe and Central Asia. That's one of our regions. And she's the president of Union of Self-Employed and Informal Workers in Bulgaria. So Sister Willie's been organizing home workers from the last 23 years. I'd like to invite Sister Willie, because there are also some notable victories in Bulgaria specifically. So Sister Willie, I have 3 questions. One is, what strategies have been effective in fostering closer engagement with municipalities in Bulgaria? And how have the local level efforts contributed to improving the conditions of home-based workers nationally? And in what ways will this impact outcomes at national level for home-based workers? Sister Willie, over to you. We'd really like to hear from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad that I can present the situation in Bulgaria, but it's not different from other locations, because in Bulgaria also a lot of home-based workers, they are informal, especially in the sewing industry. But what we noticed during the last decade, we had a political crisis. The there are changes, constant changes in the government, and it was useful to build bridges with the government and with other organizations. And our syndicate, the management of our syndicate, decided that we need to help the sewing industry and home-based workers who are in Bulgaria, and we decided to negotiate at local level because we have such a political situation that the mayor is elected for 4 years and he's constantly functioning during 4 years, and which brings stability. And that is why we started to negotiate with municipality, with mayor's office, and they provided premises and included our representatives at local level to the Committee for Social Policy, where we identified the problems in the sewing industry, because our sewing workers from the garment sector left Bulgaria in 2007 when Bulgaria joined the European Union. A lot of our informal workers left Bulgaria to Western Europe. And lately, the medium and small size enterprises, they started to generate and provide works not only at home, but also partially in factories. And they pay 2 or 3 hours of work to informal workers who work in factories. And this method of works helps to employers to exploit the workers. We worked with legal specialists in Bulgaria. This is a confederation of industrial in industrial sector. They also want to eliminate informal economy because it hinders the future development and economic development. And what we did, we appealed to the mayor in at the border of the Bulgaria and Macedonia in city which is called Petric. And we, together with mayor and economic policy department, we established a policy. And in Bulgaria, there is a law available for home-based workers under the labor code. But in practice, this law is not followed, and nobody can help us, neither ILO, no European Commission, to make sure that the government set control of the implementation of the labor code, because in Bulgaria we are lacking the concept who is considered to be a worker. The worker in Bulgaria considered to be a person who works under the contract, under the labor contract. And ILO tried to help us, and European Commission helped us to negotiate, but we could not perceive and convince the government that the workers are those, that the workers also should include the home-based workers. And that is why the fight is quite difficult. The situation is quite difficult. And I saw a lot of people here who participated in this study, and I hope that we need to increase the monitoring or supervision role of the ILO and role of the European Commission, because for government it's very convenient to have informal workers. We have 2 million workers who work under the contract and 1.5 million who works informally. And pension age increased. The old people who retires, this retirement age is increasing, and unfortunately we have a lot of senior people, and that is why the government hides the statistics. If you look at the European statistics, you will see that there is no informal economy. It's about only 4%, and there are no home-based workers because they are not visible, they are non-existent. I'm sorry for being emotional, and that is why we started to work at local level to convince the mayor that it's needed for a mayor's office to retain workers, because if there are no workers, the economy will not develop, and they understood, and that is why they are helping us in our development as well. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Sister Violeta, for providing this perspective from Bulgaria. And Bulgaria, just for the participants to know, is one of the other countries who's ratified ILO Convention 177. But post-ratification, most of the policies are actually not very relevant for the home workers that we are organizing. So thanks a lot, Sister Billy. We'll go to the next speaker. Now we'll go straight to Indonesia, because Indonesia also we have some very interesting, perspective, which will be provided by Sister Titin Kustini, who's a member of HomeNet International's Executive Committee, and she's the Secretary of HomeNet Southeast Asia and EXCO member of HomeNet Indonesia, which is a country-level organization. Sister Titin, I have again, the same question, but in three parts. One is, what steps did you take to enable, the kind of government attention that you have in Indonesia? What other factors made this possible, and what impact has this made on your efforts to bring more visibility to the issues of home-based workers? So again, something very positive that we found in Indonesia through this study. So we'd really like to hear from you.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I will to tell about the process, the condition in Indonesia. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evenings. Indonesia now has not yet ratified ILO Convention 177 concerning home workers, and Indonesia does not have a labor policy that protects for the home workers. Since 2005, we have been advocating for policy for home workers related to labor, social protection, social security, and others. And in 2019, we actively engage with the Ministry of Manpower to advocate for policy supporting home workers. This effort result in a positive response from the Manpower Office in Banten Province. Following our discussion with both the ministry and the regional office, together with the Ministry of Manpower, the Department of Manpower, and companies employing home workers, we collaborate to develop a standard operating procedure we call SOP for the home workers. This SOP outline company policy on wage, work agreement and the continuity of works order for the home workers. This has enabled home based workers to receive the minim the standard minimum wage, and the companies that employ home workers are required to have standard operating procedure that are the same as each other in terms of wage and nominal amount that are mutually agreed upon, but are still below the minimum wage standard for formal worker. Likewise, to continue orders, yeah, for the home workers, and the home worker have a card as the home worker at the company, and for social security, home worker also receive a subsidy for medical treatment from the company. Uh, that the condition when we advocate with the advocation with the in the Banten province. Yeah. With this SOP, home workers are connected to the company, so they always get a work order, which are not low, even if they are not as high as the regional minimum wage for formal workers. Also, they get medical benefit it even if only for the home worker themselves, not for family, but only for home worker themselves. The ministry has suggested to release SOP at national level from next year for next year. So far, only one region has implemented this initiative. In 2024, Indonesia, together with Homenet International, have conducted research regarding home workers who work in the garment and footwear supply chains. From the research finding, we have done several things. We have submitted the result of a research on garment and footwear carried out by Indonesia workers to the government and related stakeholders such as the Ministry of Manpower, the Indonesia Employees Association, trade union, and other stakeholders, including to Ministry uh, of Human Empowerment, because the majority of workers are women. We will also convey this to the coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs. Apart from that, we also convey the result of our garment and footwear research and social protection research when advocating for the ratification of ILO Convention 177 on footwear. And the continuous advocacy with many political parties have enabled them to become familiar with the issues of home workers and are of the opinion that there should be a policy for home workers, at least to respond most significantly in several sectors, such as garment and footwear. They are providing support to Homenet Indonesia, to home workers, and are involved in discussion with the government to push forward policy for the home workers. And our advocacy effort have led to a recommendation that we will collaboratively follow up on with the governments. This includes addressing the conclusion and recommendation formula during our tripartite discussion. Then the recommendation consists the ones a clear and structured protocol or SOP for home workers are very necessary to improve their safety, welfare, and work efficiency. With clear standard, not only will worker rights we guarantee, but also the quality and consistency of the products produced will be better. This will provide long-term benefit for workers, employee, and the supply chains as a whole. In this case, we will take the garment and footwear sector as a model for the developing protocol and SOP, because there are more home workers working in this sector in Indonesia. Number two, the recommendation employment regulation for home workers at the national and regional level in responding to the significant needs of the problems faced by home worker, refer to ILO Convention 177 on the of 1996. And the third recommendation, implementation of social protection and social security for home workers that is affordable for home workers. And number four, the recommendation is a ratification of ILO Convention 177 on 1996 concerning home workers. The result of research and supply chains of home workers, also the social protection research. The research in the garment and footwear sector greatly strengthens the picture of the issue of home workers, thus strengthening our advocacy step to come up with recommendation that must and will be follow up regarding policy for home workers. That our condition and process our advocacy until this times. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sister Titin, and you very well described the role of organizing in bringing visibility and recognition for home-based workers. Now, we'll go to our last worker leader speaker, and I'll go to India now. And we have Anisha Bagban, who's joined us. She started her work as a home-based workers and has been organizing home workers for the last 20 years. In Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA, which is the largest trade union of informal economy women workers. Anisha Ben, this study actually found a lot of low wages and irregular work which home workers receive in India. There were two locations we saw, Ahmedabad and Tirupur, and you are working in Ahmedabad. I want to know from your perspective as a home-based worker, as a trade union leader, what are the key asks of home-based workers in India?
नमस्ते सभी को। जैसे
Namaste
जानवी
to
मैंने बताया,
everyone.
मेरा नाम अनीसा है और
How
सेवा से मैं 24
Janvi
साल
sister
से जुड़ी
told me,
हुई हूँ।
I'm Anisha and I'm associated with Seva for last
जैसे
24
बात
years.
करते हैं हम
If
के
we speak
उनके
of
वेजेस जो है वो बहुत
the
ही लो
wages
है।
are very low for home workers,
तो
home-based workers.
इसमें
So
बहुत सारे एस्पेक्ट है, जैसे कि
there are
उनका
several
जो
aspects like
सप्लाई चेन है
the supply
वो
chain
बहुत ही लंबी होती है घर खाता
is
कामगार
very
के लिए,
long,
कि जो भी
especially for
बहनें
those
हैं जो
account
काम कर
holding
रही हैं
home workers. The sisters
उनका
who are
यही रहता
working,
है
what they
कि
complain generally
सप्लाई
is
चेन लंबी होने की वजह
the
से
supply
जो
chain,
काम
since
उनके पास
supply
आता
chain is
है
very long,
वो
the work they
डायरेक्ट
get in
कंपनी से
hand,
नहीं आता है,
it
लेकिन
does
वो
not come to them
कमीशन थ्रू
directly from
आता है।
company. It is through
तो सबसे बड़ा जो
commission and
है वो यही
mediators.
है कि उनका
So that is a
जो
major
वेजेस है
concern,
बहुत कम है। साथ ही
and
साथ
for that
जो
reason their
उनका
wages
काम
are
है
very less.
तो उसमें
Along
भी ये है कि
with this,
सीजनल
the work
वाइज वो
they
रहता है
do, it is a
और
seasonal kind of work.
जो
So what
सीजन के
happens
हिसाब से
is
रहता है तो वो
the
ये
work
रहता है
is
कि
according to season.
सॉरी
So I'm sorry.
जो सीजन के हिसाब से रहता है
So
तो
the
सप्लाई
work
चेन
they
की
get
वजह
is
से
seasonal.
ये
So
एक
because of
हो
supply
गया।
chain, this is kind of effects are
और
seen.
इंडिया के अंदर जो
If
मिनिमम
we
वेज
talk
है
of
वो पीस
India,
रेट के
the
थ्रू नहीं
minimum
है
wage is
और
not
इंडिया
through
में
piece
ये
rate.
पीस रेट से मिनिमम वेज नहीं है और बहनों को
Minimum
इसकी
wage is
अवेयर भी
not based
नहीं
on
है कि
piece
उनका
rate,
मिनिमम
and
वेज
our
कितना
sisters are
होना
not
चाहिए।
aware. They
तो
are
वो
not even aware that
बातचीत
how
से
much their minimum
ठेकेदार के
wage should
साथ
be.
उनकी जो
But
बार्गेनिंग
they
पावर है
only
वो भी बहुत
negotiate
कम है।
and bargain with their
साथ ही
contractors,
साथ
but that
देखने
power is
जाए तो
very
माइग्रेंट
less.
वर्कर
If
इतने
we
आ रहे हैं जो
see that
सिटीज
there
में
are several
जो
migrant
छोटे छोटे
workers in
गांव है
the
वहां से
cities, in
तो उनका
smaller
भी ये रहता है कि जो माइग्रेंट वर्कर है
villages,
वो अपने
those migrant workers are
अपना जो काम है बहुत ही कम प्राइस पर कर रहे
they
हैं,
are not
और
they are
जिससे
working on
लोकल
very
बहनें
low
जो है
prices,
उनको मिनिमम
and
वेज
for
बहुत ही
that
कम मिल
reason
रहा है
the
पीस रेट
local
वर्कर के
sisters
हिसाब
are
से।
not
तो
getting
ये तीन
proper
एस्पेक्ट जो
minimum
है वो
wage
सबसे ज्यादा
on the
यहाँ
basis
पर
of
देखे
piece
जा
rate.
रहे हैं कि
So these
बहनों
are
को क्यों
three
इतना
major aspects which are
कम प्राइस
observed.
मिल रहा
Our
है।
sisters are getting very low rates.
जानिबन, मैं इसमें कंटिन्यू करूं कि हम क्या क्या मांग कर रहे हैं?
Yes, please.
ओके, तो एज अ सेवा अगर मैं
So
बताऊं
if
कि अभी हम इंडिया में क्या क्या मांग कर रहे हैं, तो सबसे
so
पहले हमारा
as a
यही है कि
seva,
हम
let me
मिनिमम
tell you
वेज जो
what all
पीस रेट
demands
से
we are
है
making in India.
वो
The
जाहिर
minimum
हो
wage
जाए
rate which is
बहनों के लिए।
which we
दूसरा
want
है
it
कि
on the
सोशल
piece rate.
सिक्योरिटी। तो
Second thing is
वैसे
about
बोला जाए
social
सोशल सिक्योरिटी
security.
तो वो बहुत ही बड़ा
So if we talk of
मीनिंग होता है
social
सोशल
security,
सिक्योरिटी का, लेकिन
it
हम
has a
मांग रहे
wider
हैं सोशल
meaning, but
प्रोटेक्शन।
what we
तो खास तौर
are
पर
talking
जो
about is
4
social
एस्पेक्ट
protection.
है
The
कि
four
बहनों को
aspects
एक तो
are there.
हाउसिंग मिलना
So our
चाहिए,
sisters
दूसरा
should
कि
get
उनका
housing. Second
हेल्थ
is
और इंश्योरेंस मिलना
they should
चाहिए,
get health and
चाइल्ड केयर
insurance
मिलना
facilities.
चाहिए, और
They should get child
मैटरनिटी
care
बेनिफिट उनको
and
मिलना
they should get
चाहिए। तो
maternity
एक ये है
benefits.
हमारी
These are
मांग
the
दूसरी। और
these are
थर्ड
our
है कि
demands.
हम
The
इंडिया
third
में नेशनल
thing is
पॉलिसी के लिए
in
काम कर रहे
India
हैं।
we are also working
जब तक
towards a
सी वन
national
सेवन
policy
सेवन
in India.
रेटिफाई नहीं हो
When
रहा है तब तक हम
C177 is
यही कर
being
रहे हैं कि होम बेस्ड वर्कर के लिए
ratified, till
नेशनल
that time
पॉलिसीज होनी
what we are
चाहिए।
trying is there should
तो
be a
इसके
national
बहुत
policy
सारे
for home based workers. So
स्टैंड है, जैसे कि हम सामाजिक सुरक्षा की अगर सोशल सिक्योरिटी की बात करें
if we
तो
talk
जो
of
होम
social
बेस्ड वर्कर, और
security,
अभी हमने स्टडी
so
में भी देखा है कि
we have
हेल्थ
seen in
के
the studies
इश्यूज बहुत
also
सारे हैं
there are
बहनों के,
several health related
जैसे कि
issues with our
उनको
sisters, like
फिजिकल प्रॉब्लम भी
they
बहुत
have
होते हैं, पूरा दिन
physical
उनको
problems.
बैठना होता है, और उस हिसाब
If
से
whole day
उनके
they are
बैक
sitting,
पेन होना,
and
उनकी आंखों में
because
कमजोरी
of
होना,
that
ये वगैरह भी बहुत
get
सारा
back
रहता है।
pain or their eyes
तो
visual
82%
power is
हमने देखा है कि उनको
affected. So we have seen
कल्याण
82% cases.
बोर्ड की हम मांग कर रहे हैं कि उनका
So we want
वेलफेयर
a
बोर्ड
welfare
होना
board
चाहिए।
for our
जैसे कि
home based
बीडी वर्कर
worker
के लिए
sisters.
कल्याण बोर्ड था, लेकिन वो रिपील
Like
हो गया है, जिस
earlier
वजह
there
से
used to be a
बहनों
welfare
को
board
जो
which has been repealed.
ओपीडी की सुविधा
So
मिलती
the
थी
OPD
हेल्थ की,
facility which
वो
our
अभी
sisters were
नहीं
getting
हो रही है।
in
तो
health,
एक ये भी
it is
है,
not
साथ ही
available
साथ
now.
इंडिया में जो
Alongside in
आयुष्मान
India,
कार्ड के
there is
हिसाब से जो
Ayushman
हेल्थ
card
का
facility is there,
किया है,
under
लेकिन
which you
वो
get
जो
health benefit, but
हेल्थ कार्ड है वो सिर्फ बड़ी
that health
बीमारियों या
card
तो
is
सर्जरी में
only
ही काम
pertaining
आता
to
है। तो
bigger
जो छोटी बीमारी
diseases
है
and
या
operations.
फिर
So
उनके
smaller
हेल्थ
ailments
इश्यूज जो
or
कॉज के
smaller
लिए होते
जो
हैं तो उसमें वो काम
day-to-day
नहीं
health
आ रहा
issues,
है। और बहनों
for
की चुनौती
such
में
problems
यही
it is
आता
of
है
no
कि
use.
दिन में दिन
But
जो उनकी
main
बीमारियां
challenges
होती
faced
है,
by our
रोज
sisters,
बरोज की जो छोटी छोटी बीमारियां होती है,
the
और
day-to-day
उनकी जो आजीविका
ailments
कम
they
है,
face,
उस वजह से उनका
and
बहुत सारा
uh,
आजीविका में
so
से
in
पैसा
that
ऐसा
light,
होता है
the
जो
low
उनके
incomes
मेडिसिन
they
वगैरह
earn.
में चला
So
जाता
most of
है।
their
तो एक
low
ये
incomes
बहुत
are
बड़ा
spent in the medicine and
एस्पेक्ट है
healthcare,
उनका
and it's a
हेल्थ
major
का।
issue related to their
साथ
health,
ही साथ
our
अगर हम
sisters'
देखने
health.
जाए तो
If we also
क्लाइमेट
look
चेंज के
at
शॉक्स
the
भी अभी इतने
climate
बढ़ रहे हैं, और उस
change,
वजह से
there are several
बहनों के
sources of
हेल्थ
climate
पर
change, and
भी बहुत
indirectly that
सारे
is also
प्रॉब्लम होते
affecting
हैं। जैसे कि अभी हम
adversely
बात
on the
करें
health
कि
of our
अगर
sisters. Like
ज्यादा
we
हीट है
talk,
और
if
उस
it,
वजह से
if the heat
बहनों के
is
घर
more,
बहुत ही छोटे
and
होते हैं,
if
और
the
बहुत ही
houses are
स्लम
very
एरिया में होते
small
हैं, जिस वजह
and
से
they
उनको
live
डायरेक्ट
in slum
सनलाइट
areas,
नहीं मिल रही है।
and for the they
और
don't get
अगर
sunlight
उनके घर में
because
ही
of that.
एक ही रूम के
If
अंदर किचन है तो
even
उसमें
in
भी
a single
गर्मी का
room
प्रमाण
they
इतना
have
सारा बढ़
kitchen
जाता है
also,
कि जिस वजह से बहनों
the
के
temperature increases
चक्कर
so
आना
much
या फिर
that
उनका बीपी
our
लो होना,
sisters
उनको
face
स्किन डिसीज
problems
होना
like
वगैरह
low blood
के बहुत
pressure,
सारी
getting fits, and
दिक्कतें आती हैं।
several kind of problems
तो
they face
जैसे
because of these
मैं सेवा की
conditions.
अगर बात करूं कि
If I
क्लाइमेट
talk
चेंज
of
में हमने
Seva,
अभी
as
एक
far as
छोटा सा
climate change is
इनिशिएटिव
concerned,
लिया है उनके
we
घर
have
के
taken a
लिए,
small initiative
जिसको
for their
हम
homes.
स्काईलाइट या तो
Uh,
उजासे ही बोलते हैं, जो एक
we
छत
call
में
it skylights,
एक ऐसी बारी
and
हम लगा रहे हैं
in
जिससे
the
अगर
on
वो
the
खोली
terrace
जाए तो
we
उसके घर
are
में
attaching
डायरेक्ट
a
सनलाइट
window
आए
sort of
और
thing.
वो
If that is open, there's a
घर में
direct
उजाला
sunlight
दे। तो उससे
reaching
ये भी
in
हुआ
their
है कि
houses, which will
उनका जो
increase the
लाइट का
light
बिल
also.
था वो भी
So
कम हुआ
that
है,
has also reduced their
जिससे उसकी
electricity bill
आजीविका का
utilized
जो
on
भाग
lighting.
ये
So
खर्च में जाता
the
था तो वो
part of
कम हो गया
earning which
है।
was being spent
दूसरा है
for
कि
that purpose
हीट
has
वेव
been now
इंश्योरेंस एक
saved.
हमने किया था
They have ensured
2023 में हैं
against heat
और
wave
तब हमने अहमदाबाद
in
सिटी के जो होम बेस्ड
2023.
वर्कर है
In that,
उसमें से हमने 4000
home-based
सदस्यों को
city,
ये
home-based workers in
पायलट
Ahmedabad
बेसिस पे किया था कि
cities were
जिससे
included
उनकी
in a
दिक्कतें
pilot
क्या होती है तो
initiative to
इंश्योरेंस
know
थ्रू
their
हम उसको
problems
रिसॉल्व कर पाए
and through
और
and
तब
address
हमने
it
ये
through
भी देखा था
insurance. At that
एफजीडीज
time,
और
we
जो
saw
सर्वेज किए थे
the
तो हमने ये
surveys
भी देखा
conducted
था
at
कि
that time. What we
उनकी
found
दिक्कतें
was
ये हैं कि उनको पीने
what
का
the
साफ
problems
पानी भी
they
नहीं मिल
face
रहा है,
is
या
they
तो
don't
फिर
even get a
ठंडा पानी नहीं
potable,
मिल रहा है।
clean potable
तो वहां पे
drinking
भी
water,
हमने
or
एक
they don't
छोटा
get cold
इनिशिएटिव ये
water.
लिया था कि हमने
So
वाटर
small
जग उनको
initiative we
प्रोवाइड
took.
किए थे,
We provided them
जिससे
water
वो
jugs,
अपने काम की
with the
जगह
help
पर वो
of which
पानी लेकर
they
बैठे और
could
वो पानी पी सके।
sit with
तो
water at
ये
the
छोटे
places of
छोटे
their work
इनिशिएटिव
and
है,
consume
लेकिन
water
वो
while
बड़े
working.
बेसिस पर
These
या
are small
गवर्नमेंट के थ्रू हम
initiatives,
उसको
but
कैसे लिंक कर
we
पाए, तो
want
एक
to
हमारी वो भी डिमांड
actually
है
want to link
कि
them
जैसे
with
वेलफेयर
government
बोर्ड्स
on a
बीडी
larger
वगैरह
scale.
के हैं, तो
So the
सभी
workers
होमलेस
are
वर्कर
there,
को नहीं, लेकिन कुछ ट्रेड में
but
जहाँ पर वेलफेयर बोर्ड है
several
यहाँ या फिर ई
welfare
श्रम
boards
कार्ड
are
के
there
थ्रू
for
उसे
different types of workers, which
लागू
are
किया
those
जाए, तो
benefits are
ये
not
एक
there with
इंश्योरेंस वाला
home-based
वो कर
workers.
दे।
So we also want to extend this
दूसरा है कि
this benefit for them.
नेशनल
Another thing which I
पॉलिसीज,
want to say,
तो
it's about national
C177 जो
policies.
ILO का हम कर रहे हैं कि वो
50
रेटिफाई हो जाए,
ILO
लेकिन अभी तक वो
177
अगर
should be
नहीं हो
ratified.
रहा है
If that is not being
777, तो हम नेशनल पॉलिसीज की
ratified
बात करें होम बेस्ड
for the
वर्कर के
time,
लिए,
we should talk
कि
of
जहाँ
developing
पर
a national policy
नेशनल
for
पॉलिसी
home-based
के
workers.
थ्रू हम
So
सोशल सिक्योरिटी को भी
through that
लागू कर
national
पाए, जैसे
policy, we
चाइल्ड
should be
केयर
able
हो
to
गया, मैटरनिटी बेनिफिट हो
implement
गए, या
social
फिर
security,
हाउसिंग हो गया।
child
क्योंकि
care
सबसे ज्यादा जो
benefits,
दिक्कतें
maternity
होती है वो
benefits
यही
can be
होती है कि
extended,
होम
because
बेस्ड
these are
वर्कर
the
घर में
major
ही रहता है
problems
और वो
faced by the
बहुत ही
home-based workers, who are women
स्कैटर्ड
who
है,
stay at
जिस
home
वजह
and
से
they are
उनको
very
ऑर्गेनाइज
unorganized
करके
and they
उनके
are
लिए
scattered
ये सब
at
कुछ
several
करना
places.
बहुत ही
So in
मुश्किल हो
order to
रहा है।
organize them and do all this
तो
work is
हमारी
very
ये 3 मांग है
challenging. So
कि
these are
सबसे
our
पहले
3
तो
demands.
उनको
First of
जो
all, we
मिनिमम
should
वेज है वो पीस रेट से हो
they
जाए,
ensure
सेकंड कि उनके लिए
minimum wage at piece
सोशल
rate.
प्रोटेक्शन हम कर
Secondly,
पाए,
there
और
should
थर्ड
be
जो है वो
social
ये है
protection for them.
कि
And third thing
नेशनल
is
पॉलिसी बन जाए।
there should be a
तो
national policy
हमारी
for
यही
home-based
मांग है,
workers.
और हम
These
इसके लिए
are our
बहुत
demands,
सारे
and we are
इनिशिएटिव
working
ले
in
रहे
this
हैं। जैसे
direction. We are taking
नेशनल
several
पॉलिसीज
initiatives
के लिए
in this
अभी हम
direction for
लेबर
national
मिनिस्टर
policies.
से हमने
We have
बातचीत की है,
we have
प्री
had talks with
बजटरी
labor
मीटिंग में हमने
ministers,
फाइनेंस
and
मिनिस्टर
in
से
the
भी बात की
immediate
है,
meeting we have
और
had
साथ ही
meeting with
साथ
finance
हम बहुत
minister.
से ऐसे
Alongside,
स्टेट लेवल
we
पे भी
are
इनिशिएटिव ले रहे
also
हैं और मीटिंग्स
taking
वगैरह
several
कर रहे हैं
initiatives at
लेबर
state levels
मिनिस्टर से,
and conducting
कि
meeting with
जिससे
labor
ये आगे
ministers.
जाए। साथ ही साथ हम
Sorry,
ग्लोबल
In order to take
फेडरेशन
this
से भी
forward, and
ये
we are
सब
also
बातचीत
talking with the
कर रहे हैं
federations, we are
और
talking to
उसको
them,
आगे ले जाने की कोशिश
and we are
कर रहे
trying
हैं।
to take it forth
Thank you.
in
Thank you.
Thanks
consultation
a
with
lot,
them.
Anisha Ben, and sorry to prompt you, but also some people were getting the translation and Hindi both together, so it was a bit tough for them to understand. I'm just going to summarize the key demands. Anisha Ben spoke very well about some of the issues being faced on the ground and the work that SEWA is also doing, but they have 4 key asks. One is social protection, first and foremost, which includes housing, because women work from their own home, so it is their workplace. The second is childcare, third is maternity benefits, and fourth is healthcare. The second key ask is a national policy for home-based workers, which is based on ILO Convention 177. Third is occupational health and safety. And fourth is the piece rates that match minimum wages. Thanks a lot, Anisha Ben, for putting it very well and making it contextual for our listeners. Now, I think we're also coming towards the end of this panel, and we would like to invite an expert to actually provide her reflections. Alison Cockery, who is WICO's Law Program Director, and Alison is a human rights lawyer with expertise in economic, social, and cultural rights. Alison, we would like your reflection on the experiences previously shared by home-based worker leaders and the implications of the findings for regulation and due diligence in the sector. So over to you, Alison. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Janvi. I'm very pleased to share some reflections on both the study findings that Shalini outlined very comprehensively at the start of the webinar, but also the very rich country examples from HNI affiliates. And I think it's a really timely conversation for us to be having about how the study and how the country experiences can advance due diligence in the garment and footwear sector. The future of mandatory due diligence, which is the topic of this year's OECD forum, is one of intense debate. The European Commission is considering incorporating the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive into omnibus regulation. European countries are beginning the process of transposing the directive into their national law. Negotiations for a legally binding treaty on business and human rights continue at the UN. And as we heard from our sisters in different parts of the world, there are growing demands for governments in supplier countries to adopt explicit protections for home workers, including in the context of ILO Convention 177. So because of this kind of broader political context, I'm going to focus my remarks on the design of due diligence legislation. In particular, I'm going to speak to a position paper developed by organizations of home workers from garment production countries, together with HNI, HomeNet Southeast Asia, HomeNet South Asia, and WeGo, which sets out demands from home workers for due diligence legislation. And I think a copy of that, or a link to that paper, can be shared in the chat. So although I'm focusing on the design of due diligence legislation, the practices that the paper argues should be made mandatory through law are, of course, practices that companies should be pushed to adopt proactively to minimize negative outcomes, model good practice, and ensure compliance with laws as they emerge and evolve. And I'm going to highlight 3 takeaways from the research and the country examples. The first is the research really emphasizes that subcontracted home workers face serious human rights risks and that their inclusion in due diligence is therefore essential. Because home workers are outside factories, they're rarely identified in inspections or mentioned in audit reports, and brands may not even be aware of the role home workers play in their supply chains. This invisibility makes it more difficult to identify and address the human rights abuses that they can face, which are different to those faced by factory workers. As we heard, the further down the supply chain you go, the less likely workers are to have their rights protected because of their employment status, the more precarious their work is, and the less they earn. And I think what the study really shows so vividly, as Shalini expressed, is the very concrete and real adverse impact this has on the workers' daily lives. Irregular work makes earnings precarious. This precarity means that earnings are falling well below minimum wage and are insufficient to cover basic needs. We see borrowing as a coping mechanism that's leading to high levels of indebtedness. And as a result, workers are unable to provide sufficient food, medicine and healthcare, and other household essentials for their families. The research also highlights, of course, that these risks are not gender neutral, given the care responsibilities that many women hold. So the EU directive makes it clear that companies' due diligence obligations extend throughout their chain of activities. This was a very critical win for home workers that needs to be protected as due diligence legislation continues to be developed. Limiting due diligence obligations to either just to the first tier of the chain would roll back the gains in visibility that home workers have secured and would result in further deterioration of their working conditions. At the same time, it's also important due diligence obligations don't create any perverse incentives for companies to remove homework from their supply chains if it's considered too risky. This would mean a severe impact on home workers, either losing work completely or, more likely, their work being driven underground and away from external oversight. The second thing the study highlights is that responsible purchasing practices are a key way companies can mitigate the risks of violating the rights of workers in their chain of activities. We know that homework is driven by the purchasing practices of companies, and the study shows the knock-on effects of shorter than feasible lead times, low prices, changes in orders, and late payments. And for this reason, key demands from home workers in the design of due diligence legislation is that it include written contracts for all workers, including home workers, and cascading contractual obligations, so that buyers include provisions about keeping records about subcontracted work in their contracts with suppliers, and that these provisions then trickle down to subcontracted factories and workshops. And support for these demands is in line with Module 12 of the OECD's due diligence guidance. Third, both the study and country examples remind us that understanding and supporting their organizations is critical for meaningful engagement with home workers. The research highlights particular forms of organizing amongst home workers. Not all of the organizations involved in the study were registered trade unions. They included producer cooperatives, savings and lending groups, and NGOs providing livelihood support. But when worker organizations are not recognized as trade unions and able to register formally, this also means that they're not recognized generally as social partners who are entitled to participate in social dialogue. And this limits their ability to influence policy and lawmaking processes. And as we heard, the effect of that is often laws and policies that are ill-suited to the needs of these workers. The study speaks about the constant struggle that organizations face in building relationships with different stakeholders and educating them about homework. But these relationships, though significant, do not have the consistency and formality needed to achieve more systemic and long-term gains. And for this reason, key demands from home workers in the design of due diligence legislation is that it include representation rights for all workers, meaningful consultation with workers and their organizations across all tiers, co-designed complaints mechanisms, and know your rights training about due diligence processes and grievance procedures. So to conclude, due diligence, including responsible purchasing practices, are critical for ensuring home workers' visibility, making their contributions to global supply chains transparent, and improving their working conditions. Failing to make such practices mandatory could reinforce inequalities between supply chain workers and allow the very human rights violations that due diligence aims to address to persist. Thanks, Janvi.
Thanks a lot, Alison, for actually summarizing a lot of our findings and its connect to our advocacy work. We've absolutely run out of time. I will not try to summarize all this discussion, but just to say that, we've highlighted a lot of things. And first and foremost is about the importance of data, and something that HomeNet International and all our affiliates will continue doing at national level, regional level, as well as global level. The second is about organizing. You heard from many people, including Alison, about the importance of organizing in different forms of membership-based organizations. And that's an effort we have to continue doing at a much larger scale. The third is capacity building, know your rights, but also on advocacy, building the capacity of our leaders to engage with the government. And the fourth is to advocate at national level. All our leaders talked about it. The Argentinian organization talked about it, and the Indonesian organization talked about it. So at national level, but also at a global level, which Alison talked about, the corporate due diligence sustainability, CSDDD. So those are things that we have to collectively come together and do it. And we actually can't be very thankful to everyone here. There are over 510 participants who have come, and we are hoping you'll take away some of our, findings and be our spokesperson in the outside world. So we're very thankful to you. Before we end, we promise to send you the study once it's complete and in a printable version. We promise to send it to all of you, all the people who've registered. And as a formal goodbye, we'd really like to invite our president, Sister Josephine, from Philippines, to provide a vote of thanks. Sister Olive, Sister Josephine.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Thank you, Janvi. A pleasant day to all. Of course, early morning here in the Philippines, it's already 8 o'clock in the evening. So I would like to take this opportunity to greet and thanks everyone who attended this virtual side event, where HomeNet International presented key findings from the study on home-based workers in the garment and footwear supply chain in 12 regions, as what Janvi mentioned a while ago, from Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and Latin America, which focuses on the socioeconomic challenges they encounter. And of course, with the participation of 724 home-based female workers. Thanks to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is the OECD, an international organization that works to improve economic and social well-being around the world, for creating spaces like this forum, which bring together representatives from government, business, trade unions, civil society, academia, and international organizations like HomeNet International to discuss such important issues related to due diligence in global supply chains. The study also highlights critical issues such as unfair wages, irregular work, long working hours, lack of labor law protection, limited social protection, poor working condition, and inadequate documentation that hinders the recognition by the government. I want to express my gratitude to all HomeNet International affiliates, especially our member panelists, for sharing the challenges their members face and the countries, and also for providing viable solutions. Special thanks to our presenters, Shalini Kala and Alison Corkery, for their time and valuable inputs. I am also extending my warm regards to those who supported this session. Of course, our session chair and HomeNet International Coordinator, John V., the Secretariat, and of course, all the interpreters. Likewise, as we move forward, let's build on the momentum from today's session and work together to ensure that home-based workers receive the humane dignity, rights, and opportunities they deserve. And in behalf of HomeNet International, thank you all again, and we look forward to our continued collaboration. Magandang gabi, and of course, to our athletes. Good evening, good morning, and of course, good day to all of us.
Thank you, Sister Olive, and thank you, everyone. Have a great day.